few years ago, Marsha came through the very first Leadership Network group that we did. And not long after that, she called me to ask me some group question about something. And I remember where I was standing in my house, and she said, you know, this really isn't rocket science. Leading a Listen to My Life group. So she has proven that it's not rocket science, because how many people do you think you have touched with Listen to My Life?
I'm not sure about the exact number, but a few of us were trying to figure this out because I figured you were going to ask. But I think we're starting in about a month our 24th or 25th group.
So you started with, and tell us where you live.
I'm in the Kansas City Metroplex.
That's right, we're a Metroplex too.
I'm a Metroplex.
That's awesome. So tell us how you went from experiencing this at Leadership Network, just the steps it took to kind of get to, not to the bigger part, but just the steps that got you into doing groups in your home and then church and beyond that.
Well, I was lucky to come to the first group, and through a couple friends, Tom and Linda Wilson. And the interesting thing was this all happened through my husband initially. He did the Leadership Network Institute for halftime. And that's how I came to experience the beta model, or the first one at Leadership Network. And it was amazing to come and rub shoulders with these wonderful women from all over. We came for a couple days, and then I think it was 6 weeks later, we came for another couple days and covered all of the 7 maps at that time. And this was the model that they were going to go forward with, and I thought, wow, this would be really powerful if we could just take it home and do it in our communities so that relationships could flourish together and continue to have that opportunity to build community. So I asked if I could take it home to the Metroplex in Kansas City, and they let me do that. So I reached out. We had an event for halftime with couples, and the idea was to reach out to the men to offer something for them. And I stood up, and at that time I didn't quite know how to explain this life map processing. Hey, you want to hang out and share each other's lives? But I did this to a group where there were about 75 people. And the first women who checked the little box came to my home, and that was our first group.
Which is this?
This is part of our first group.
Okay.
It's 2 pictures, but anyhow, yes, we started, and from then relationships grew, and this is one of those relentless groups that just has to continue to be together. So.
Okay, so then roll forward to your next sort of groups, and you continued in your home for a while, and then what happened?
I did, a couple in my home, and then I reached out. Some of the gals who'd gone through the first time were really pretty gifted, and I thought, gosh, you'd be great at facilitating this, and I thought, you know, it was powerful to be a part of it, and I saw the kinds of things everybody's been saying, and I got to thinking, gosh, there's such a need for this, and such an opportunity, and I certainly can't do it by myself. We need to train some other facilitators, get some other people going so that more women can experience this. So we began to, we offered it to some women at one of the churches, and very quietly, because we didn't have enough facilitators at that time to really handle a huge amount, but we started with several other groups, and then I've trained, I've had people from other churches, typically some of the women that are in leadership, or will come and we'll do a retreat setting, or typically we do ours consecutive, 10 to 12 weeks. We found that we also have a couple of dinners together, or lunches that are kind of stuck in there in between probably the valleys, so that it creates breaking of bread together, and that social takes a little bit of the tension out and helps friendships flourish even more. So we found that that's been an important part of our process.
That's great. So from homes to churches to the whole area, and I think you have a few people from your team here.
might recognize them without their tiara. I don't know. You raise your hand.
Oh, they're not in the picture there.
Yes, yes.
So even the other picture, that was the one I had. So she's done a huge, she's gone from her home into the whole community, which has been a huge impact. So then,
So,
she,
yes, out of what Marsha started, that's why we had 2 orders to
Large
the
orders.
Resurrection bookstore
right,
for
the Church of the Resurrection.
100 books at a time.
Right.
So that was all part of that.
So this story gets bigger. And what happened, how did you get from a bunch of Listen to My Life groups to this picture?
Well, these women, you know, they share their lives, they share their stories, and they realize, we don't want to stop being together, but let's do something even bigger together. Let's do something beyond ourselves. Wouldn't it be great if we began to dream and thought about what could we do? We were all mothers. We all cared about our children, and they were not as much underfoot anymore. And we thought, well, let's build a home for some children someplace else. Or let's not just build one home, let's just go ahead and build a village. So we just reached out. I reached out to each woman in this picture, and there are some others that aren't in that picture that help support as well. And we decided that we were going to build a village for orphaned and abandoned children in Eastern Africa and Uganda. If you would have asked me a year before if I was ever going to go to Africa, it was not on my radar screen. But God does some crazy things when we start sharing our stories and start dreaming together and saying, what could we do together? So I found that collectively women love relationship, and they do some of their best work in the context of community. So these are my friends that were all in Listen to My Life with me. And we built a village in Uganda. And last year, January 2011, we went, and these are the children and the mamas and some of the youth that are in the village of Kabale, Uganda. We call it the Father's House. Or in his house, there are many rooms. And this was an amazing experience for us. We felt as though really it was just a continuing living out of what God calls us to do, the possibilities. It doesn't have to be Africa. It can be also in your backyard, your community, but we are designed to make a difference.
Awesome. Wow. It'd be hard to top that, so that's why I ended with her. Are there questions that you might have for Marsha and how she got the courage? Oh, comments from the team.
How we did the real short conversion of the mom or the women at the Church of Uganda.
Well, we had an opportunity to have, we didn't know this was going to happen, of course, because our wise, the Anglican priest, Allison Barfoot, who is the, I think she's the Reverend Dr. Cannon, Allison, who, in God's sense of humor, used to be the rector about 5 minutes from my house in Overland Park, Kansas for 7 years. Now she's been in Uganda for 8 years, and she said to us the day after we got there, well, hey, how about if we do a children's camp 2 days in a row, and then you guys can do a women's conference. How about it? How about it? So you can't say no to Allison. And we're just ordinary women, okay? Nothing extraordinary, but in God's hands, we're that bit of clay, and He works us and He uses us. And so we thought, what do we do? And so we thought about what we had experienced in Listen to My Life, and really it's the telling of stories, the sharing of brokenness is what we found. Really, God takes our broken pieces and our sharp edges, and in His hands, just like the potter, He smooths those edges and creates something beautiful. He is creating that mosaic for all of us. And so we thought, what can we do? So we wanted to have a little humor. One of the gals, we decided, this is an oral culture. Also, many of them had different tribal languages. So we thought, well, let's start with the skit. Let's talk about carrying each other's burdens. So we had one of our gals, a couple of the gals, have a basket of broken clay bricks, and they were each putting them in this basket, and one was going to carry it upon her head. And if you have an opportunity to go to some of these countries, women have really strong necks. And they can carry many pounds on their head, but I don't know that our necks are quite as strong. So anyway, it was kind of funny because she was trying to carry this basket of bricks on her head, and of course all the ladies, were laughing at us and with us. But we started that. We shared then the story of the Samaritan woman, and that Jesus meeting her and knowing her whole story, knowing all of the brokenness in her life, and yet asking her to serve him with a drink of living water. So we shared this, and then we had singing, we broke into small groups and sat, and we shared a time when God had surprised us, just like Jesus had surprised the Samaritan woman. When was a time that God surprised us? We shared that, and then we had taken some of the clay bricks that they make by hand, and we had covered them with paper because, again, this is an oral language, and they can't, some of them can't read or write. So we utilized this time of sharing our burdens. What is a burden in your life? What are your burdens? And they drew those by symbols, just like our map. It became their map, this paper covered brick. And so then we chose one burden to share aloud. And as we shared that, each woman shared and listened, and many of them had never had the luxury of telling their story or listening. Their life is so busy, and it's so filled with burdens. They really were overcome by what it meant to share that. And as they did, they put their brick into this basket in the center of each of our circles. And as all the women shared, then we reached down and together we lifted that very heavy basket. And we carried it collectively together to the foot of the cross. We each took our burden that is wrapped and laid it there. And then, of course, our basket was very light. And then women, what do? We go out and we celebrate. And these women shared their native Chiga dance with us.
I need a picture of that video.
And oh yes, I actually have some, but it was such a picture of redemption and restoration, and yet the power that comes with sharing our brokenness. And let me tell you, if you want to learn how to dance, or if you want to see the personification of joy, you see these ladies that are jumping up and down. And there's a phrase in Africa that women have no freedom. They're oppressed, but women are free when they dance. And so that was so wonderful for us to experience. Just ordinary women coming together.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marsha. Any other question before we switch gears to our next thing? Let's
Yeah,
get
home
okay.
versus church. When you were doing the groups, and home versus church, was there a big difference in the atmosphere?
I think that's something that we looked at because home is very engaging for the process, and so one of the things we looked at when you move to a church, most churches are going to seem more institutional, so we would set up the room perhaps with no tables for some of the time, so we'd be in a small circle, but we also add 2 dinners at least 2 or 3 times where we're in a home, so that we can kind of build those more comfortable, engaging relationships.
When do you do the following forward?
The Following Forward map, of course, when I first did this, the Following Forward was a map that was added. And so we came back and did that, and it was wonderful. So we had our original group, we had four groups of women, or maybe 5, I think there were like 60 of us. And the Following Forward map came out. So we then had a retreat to do the Following Forward map, actually at a monastery, and we actually went into, we visited the sisters for the hours of prayer, went in. We actually did that in a retreat setting, and now we saw that there was power in waiting, giving for us some time in between, then come and revisit. So we do that now. We do the following board map in a retreat afterwards.
And how about your Christmas parties?
We like to celebrate. I like to eat. So we've tried to have some times to gather all of the women together that have been through. So I've had a Christmas coffee at my home. We also are doing, each of our groups were encouraging to do collectively a service project. So a couple of our groups are working with a group of women that have been trafficked, and Veronica's Voice is the name of it. So we're encouraging, one of the ways that following forward is to collectively do something together in some kind of a service project.
What kind of support did you have from your staff at your church? What kind of culture do you have?
Well, I started this without a church, just reaching out to people I knew. And so we now have our large church, and we have Penny back there. Raise your hand. Penny is a pastor. Was in my first class together. So we recently did it at her campus, and we have another pastor who just now has using some of our community pastors, lay pastors, who are Marilee and Audrey back there, and we're trying to be a little bit, growing some facilitators and reaching out. So they've been, I don't know, do you guys have anything you want to add to that? I think they're seeing the strength.
I came on at Resurrection after taking Marsha's class, and I really felt like that was part of my decision to go to Resurrection was because of this class. Because I felt like there were women in the county where our church is located that needed a place to put down their mask and be real and share their stories. And so once I got there, we got an opportunity to start leading classes there. And it's been life-changing for some of these women. And I have women that, when I got, now I'm not at the pastor at a satellite campus, so I'm not on the main campus, but there are women there that I see that say, "It changed my life." Well, it was not me that changed their life, but this experience, and these guys have, all been a part of that journey of leading and teaching together. It's changing women's lives. So.
I think it's unleashing women's lives in a sense. I think that we discovered that women are, we're created to be creators of life and bearers of life and nurturers of life. And many of us have done that a lot in our life, and we get to a certain point that we've forgotten how to dream. We've forgotten how to be creative in ourselves and be the daughters that God delights in. And so it's really unleashing and remembering, who God has created us to be. And then women like to do things together in relationship. And so we found that one of the things is do something together beyond yourself. So a simple thing like this, it was pretty simple. It happens because there's power in relationship.